Dear listeners, thank you for all your suggestions. Please drop a hi in the comments section and let us know what you think about today's story. Now let's start with today's story. My review of the petition for divorce was completed and just required my signature. I paused and held my pen over the signature line. I was in turmoil due to the feelings of anger, disappointment, betrayal, sadness, and regret. My parents had warned me, and I chose to ignore those warnings. They told me to never marry an actress, cheerleader, or model. So what did I do? I married a girl who was all three of them. What an idiot I was to ignore their warning. If I had taken their advice, I would not be in this painful mess. How did this all come about? My name is Henry, the Hitman Heller, and this is my story. Well, it starts back in when I was a kid. My parents were the best, and they really encouraged us to pursue our dreams and be the best. I have a sister named Caitlin a year younger than me, and a kid brother named Justin who is a year younger than her. All three of us were excellent students. As for sports, Caitlin pursued volleyball while Justin went to soccer. My sport was football, and I played Pop Warner. My dad had played professional football for 2 years, and he contributed to my development as a player. He taught me how to read plays and to always trust my instincts. When I became a freshman in high school, I had skills and experience that far exceeded my teammates. I played defensive back and wide receiver. I was so good that the head coach put me on the varsity squad the second week of the season. I was starting on the varsity squad after 3 games. What made me well known in the state was my ability to use my instincts to know where the plays were going, plus my ferocious hitting ability. During the 6th game of the season, I leveled a receiver coming across the middle so hard. He fumbled the ball. That hit made the internet as a highlight clip. My dad was managing my career, so he gave me the name Hitman to promote my name, and that made me famous. By the time I was a senior, I had college scouts calling me. So what does all this have to do with a future divorce? It was because I was a football player that I met Darcy Josephine Williams. We were friends from grade 6. She was a cheerleader and my friend too. During our junior year, we began to date. Darcy was like a dream girl. She was funny, smart, compassionate, and loving. During my first kiss with her, I felt that we were meant to get married someday, and as time went by we talked about it a little. She also felt the same way about me. She wore my letter jacket during our senior year, and our friends said we made a great couple. In the yearbook, we were voted as the couple most likely to be together forever. Despite all that, I never got past second base with her. I got some over the fabric feels, but that was all. There's some times when I couldn't find her or got her voicemail. There are also a few times when she walked funny, but I thought that was because of the cheerleading. My instincts were flashing a bit, but not enough to get my attention. My parents didn't warn me not to date her because they figured that it was a high school romance and that it would end after graduation. They were almost correct. Although we both loved each other, we had separate career goals. She received a scholarship to study genetic engineering while I earned a football scholarship at a small Division 1A school to pay for a degree in broadcast journalism. This meant we would be going to different universities. So with great sadness, we broke up after prom night, but not before we made love to each other in a motel room that night. She wanted to save herself for the man who she thought she would marry, so she gave me just a BJ. It was better if I would have invested the motel money in Enron stocks. Over the next year, we lost touch with each other. In college football, I struggled my freshman year, but I kept getting better with encouragement and advice from my dad. I started in my last 2 games. During my sophomore year, I was near the top of my game and led the team in tackles and interceptions, which included 2 pick sixes. Then my head coach took a job at a bigger program, and so I was allowed to play someplace else. I was recruited heavily and picked a top secondary school. There was a big pep rally before the first game. I was one of the few players who volunteered to say a few words about our first game of the season. As I did, I looked over at the cheerleaders, and staring back at me was Darcy. As soon as the rally was over, we sought each other. We hugged and started talking at the same time rapidly. I put my fingers to her lips and grabbed her hand so we could leave the noisy madhouse. We ended up at Culver's and got caught up over burgers, fries, and milkshakes. She looked even more beautiful than she was in high school. Her brunette hair was a little shorter now and wavy. Her 5 feet 4 inch body was more toned and muscular, but she still looked very feminine. Her breasts went from an B cup to a C. She just looked so great. She told me that she did go to UM, but left after a bad breakup with her boyfriend. So she transferred our university. I got her caught up on what happened to me. So for the next 2 years, we became exclusive. It was a cliché relationship with the cheerleader and the football player in love with each other. We had sex on our 21st date, and after we won the conference championship, we left as soon as the game was over. It was a special loving moment when I took her to my apartment. During the night, We screwed like bunnies. However, we had sex without thought of consequences 4 days before her ovulation phase, and we're fortunate she didn't get pregnant. However, our relationship was tough on me. I asked her to move into my apartment, and she refused, saying that we weren't married yet. There were times when I couldn't reach Darcy by phone. One time I went to her apartment, and her roommate told me that Darcy went out of town. When Darcy returned 2 days later, I asked her about that. She nervously said she had gone on a field trip to MIT to inquire about a doctorate program and later visited Jin, one to do an interview for an internship. I asked her why she didn't let me know about the trip, but she said the Jin 1 opening came up quick due to a cancellation, and she was too much in a hurry and nervous to call me. I also noticed that her freshly laundered clothes on the kitchen table, and some of it were sexy lingerie that I had never seen before. My instincts told me something wasn't right, but I ignored them because it was Darcy. Another yellow flag was that Darcy made some money from regional modeling and doing a few local television commercials. I didn't like seeing her doing bikini ads and kissing another actor on screen. I told her my feelings, but she dismissed them with a laugh. "Oh, is my boyfriend all jealous now? Well, don't be, because I am a one-man woman," she said with a hot look on her face. After some hot sex, we started talking marriage and kids. I planned to ask her to marry me immediately after the championship game with some help from our friends. With the national championship on the line, and with the score 24-23 in our favor, our opponents drove down the field to our 34-yard line. There was 11 seconds left as their quarterback dropped back to pass under pressure. I intercepted the ball and ran it back for a 66-yard touchdown return. The game was over after a squib kick. I ran to the cheerleaders as an assistant coach handed me the ring box. I found Darcy, got on one knee, and asked her to marry me. She said yes. There was loud cheering from the players, cheerleaders, coaches, and fans from both sides. It wasn't until later that we learned that my proposal was aired on national television, and it was run over and over again on different networks. After the game, some of the players and cheerleaders, along with their significant others, went out to celebrate at a popular bar and grill restaurant. After an hour, Darcy and I slipped out, got home, and had a tender round of lovemaking. It wasn't until 11 a.m. that I got up with a big hangover. As I consumed a bowl of cereal, I saw a long list of messages from well-wishers. There were also some messages from my parents. I already knew what they were going to say. I called them, and they were not pleased with my engagement to Darcy. "Your mother and I saw your proposal on the television. Son, we talked about this. That girl is a cheerleader, not to mention a model and an actress. That's triple trouble. Girls like that are narcissistic sociopaths, high maintenance, and egocentrist. You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't ruin it with this girl." "Dad, I know what I'm doing. Darcy is beautiful, smart, fun, and loves me like crazy. I love her too. We already decided that we are going to have 3 kids. We even picked out their names. We are going to make it to old age," I said with enthusiasm. "I hope you're right, son. I truly am. Just remember that when I was playing pro ball, I was married for 11 months of hell to an actress-singer who was also a high school cheerleader in her teen days. It took me 4 years to recover from that. Then I met the perfect woman, your mother, Sarah. She was the bank manager who helped me with getting a commercial loan expedited. Now it's 24 years later, and we're still together. Please reconsider, son, before it's too late." My mom chimed in with an anxious voice. "Please listen to your father, son." "I want to marry Darcy, Mom," I said stubbornly. "What do your instincts tell you, Henry?" Dad asked quietly. I didn't give him an answer even though I had one. Good things happened weeks later. I was a second-round choice to a team located in a state that voted for Trump, thankfully. I signed a $2.8 million over 2 years contract plus a big signing bonus. I made my dad my business manager. Darcy got accepted to MIT and didn't seem unhappy that she didn't get the Gen 1 internship. Gen 1 was supposedly looking to invent a cancer vaccine, and she had really wanted that paid internship. Now it didn't matter to her. My instincts kicked in and went a yellow alert, yet I ignored them again. 5 months later, we graduated. We had a modest June wedding. My parents suggested getting a prenuptial. I didn't want a prenuptial because I thought it would be telling Darcy that I didn't trust her. So my dad then said okay, and that he would take care of me no matter what. I asked him to see about setting Darcy and me up with joint checking and savings accounts. He said that it wouldn't work since I would be living down south and she was in New England. My parents were rather cool towards Darcy during the wedding rehearsal dinner, but were smiling during the wedding and reception. As Mr. and Mrs. Henry Heller, we went on a South Pacific honeymoon. After we got back, I reported to rookie football camp while Darcy headed to MIT and lived in a nice apartment that I paid for. Our lovemaking was intense that night, knowing that we would see each other only one weekend a month. Professional football is a very intense sport, and my rookie year was spent trying to stay competitive. I had limited free time because of the practices and games. So when it came time to buy a house, I picked a house and let Dad take care of the sale using a general power of attorney. He also was in charge of investing my earnings. During the season, we tried to keep in touch with one another. However, after a month, it was more like me trying to keep in touch with her. Over half the time, I got her voicemail. There were usually delays with her in answering my emails and text messages. Our few conversations became shorter. When I had a game in New England, she seemed to get together for dinner and some sex at her apartment. She was 35 minutes late for dinner, and she looked frazzled. Her hair looked out of play, and her clothes were wrinkled. Darcy was always meticulous about her appearance, so this was new to me. When I asked her softly why she was late, she said that it had been a long day and changed the subject. After dinner, we went to her apartment where she immediately took a shower with the door locked. The shower done, she took her clothes and put them into the washing machine. That was strange too, since doing laundry was not one of her favorite things to do. Our lovemaking seemed flat since she just lay there like her mind was someplace else. The next morning she drove me to the airport and gave me a kiss on the cheek. As I stood there on the sidewalk, I realized that we had never actually kissed since we got together yesterday. Again, my instincts went active and were at red alert. Only this time, I decided to accept my instincts and get to the bottom of what was going on. Later that week, I met with my parents at their home and told them about everything that was going on with Darcy and me. I told them I was afraid that her doctoral program was destroying our marriage. My mom said that a real wife would have stayed home with her husband and found another college to get her doctorate. My father still had my general power of attorney, and he said he would try to find out more about the Darcy situation since he wanted me to focus on football. We then made plans to go hunting after the season was over. A couple of weeks later, there were 2 games left in the season and my team was at 12 wins and 2 losses, which was enough to make the playoffs. That's when I got a phone call from my dad, who sounded both sad and angry. He said that he was driving up to visit me tomorrow and that he had a lot of information on Darcy. We sat at my dining room table as he laid out what the private investigation agency had discovered. It was not good. My dad spoke softly and trying to be sensitive to how I was going to react to the evidence. Son, I am so sorry to have to tell you all this, but there isn't any good way to tell you this. Darcy has definitely been cheating on you, and she has been seeing this guy off and on since high school. What? You mean since we were together in high school? When we were exclusive in college? And when we were engaged? Yes, it's all there in the investigation report. So she stopped cheating on me when we got married? No. I hate to tell you that she is still seeing this guy. The relationship is sexual too, on a regular basis. She has been spending 4 to 5 nights every week at his house. No, it can't be. She loves me. What proof do you have? The agency managed to hack his email and his hard drive. They also downloaded Darcy's stuff using her password that you provided. Then there are the pictures. To my horror and anger, Dad laid out a series of pictures that had dates on them going back to our senior year in high school. The pictures were of some dork and my wife at different places like the beach, restaurants, parks, etc. One picture series, from our junior year in college, showed her jogging naked on the beach. Some of them were her stripping out of her cheer uniform, others of them having sex. The latest pictures were taken 4 days ago and had her posing naked while leaning against the mast of a sailing boat. What the hell? My wife never liked me seeing her naked, even after we got married. She would make me look away while she got undressed and then get under the bed covers. I jumped up and threw a dining room chair into the living room, smashing the glass coffee table which had Darcy's grandmother's antique vase on it. Well, there goes $1,000. Screw her lying, cheating butt. Game mine, son, my dad quietly said. When I was a kid, he would say that to me when I was too hyper or worked up during a Pop Warner game. I closed my eyes and started to take long, deep breaths and started thinking about chocolate milk shakes and cookies. Those were my rewards for playing well. Now calm down. I sat back down. My dad looked concerned about me. I guess that's the thing about being a parent. You never stop loving and worrying about your kids, no matter how old they are. Who is this maggot? My dad handed me a photo of short, somewhat built, guy dressed in an expensive 3-piece suit. Darcy was standing next to him. She normally wore 4-inch heels, so that means he had to be about 5 feet 5 inches to 5 feet 6 inches tall. The name is Dr. Chad Malman. The guy's some super Mensa type. He was her science lab partner in high school. He graduated a year early. In Darcy's junior year, he was a grad assistant working on his doctorate, and she took a couple of classes from him. Later he founded and became CEO of Gen 1. This is him? He looks okay. Well, He wears lifts and had some face work done. He also works out at the gym. Now easy son, it gets worse. He's the direct supervisor of Darcy at Gen 1, and he's rich too. For 5 minutes, I just sat there stewing and trying to absorb how my life had just been torpedoed out of the blue. I love that girl, but obviously her affections were for some geek in a lab coat. Who got all this information? I glumly said. An old golf buddy by the name of Victor Deswine owns a private security company. Don't recognize the name? His wife is that cute little gal named Laura Beth. She was the television reporter who interviewed you just after you were drafted. As a favor to me, his staff did a full investigation into Darcy and her scumbag boyfriend. Victor also said that Gen 1 isn't all they say they are to the public. That info is in the orange folder. Look, son, why don't you read all of this stuff while I cook us some supper? Then we can talk more. Dad cooked. I read. By the time I was done, I felt burning anger not just at Darcy, but at Chad and Gen 1 for all the lives they ruined in the names of corporate profits. There had to be justice met out to all three of them. 40 minutes later, we began eating quietly. We were also killing a bottle of Jack. So son, what do you want to do? Burn or reconciliation? My dad softly asked as he buttered a dinner roll. Burn. Darcy and Chad and Gen 1. To the ground, I said venomously. I have a friend of a friend who works at SEC. I'll get him linked up to Victor. As a backup, a couple of my old football teammates, Wild Bill Gustafson and Bobby Grindle, will be also contacted and brought in on Operation Burn. They co-own a dark ops company, kinda like the old Blackwater outfit. Dad, isn't Bobby the guy who took those 3 cheerleaders a few years back? Is inviting this guy into the operation a good idea? I said with concern. Yes to both questions. One of his nicknames came from his Latin America missions. They call him Loco down there. Okay, so, just how to meet all these people? Good old Southern Boy Network. How do you like the meal? Superb as usual. And thanks, Dad, for everything. You're always welcome, son. 2 weeks later, since my supper meeting with my dad, I stopped calling Darcy. After a few days, she actually called me and apologized for not calling me back. She said that she had been very busy at work. Then, she asked me how I was doing. I asked her why she even bothered to ask, and that her true focus should be on her boss Chad. I hung up. That's when the phone blitz began as she called and emailed me repeatedly over the next 2 days. But I ignored all of them. On the 3rd morning after I last talked to her, she flew home and found that her house key didn't work and that I wasn't home. I was staying at my parents' house. There were again a series of frantic calls which I ignored until the 10th call. Henry, honey, I can't get into the house. Where are you? Is everything okay? She asked in a shaky voice. Darcy, I loved you. Now, I hope you get everything you want in life. Go back to Boston. I'll come to see you tomorrow, and we'll talk at your place. Until then, I have nothing to say. Goodbye. I said in a motionless voice and hung up on her again. My neighbor reported that Darcy was crying as she drove away in a rental car. That same afternoon, I was on a plane to Boston. The plan was now in motion. After picking up my rental car, I drove to her apartment. The lights were off when I knocked on the door to the apartment that I had paid rent for her. As I walked away, an elderly neighbor asked me what I was doing in front of Darcy's door. I told the old woman that I was Darcy's husband and that I was here to give my wife a surprise visit. You're her husband? I thought that the short, skinny guy was her husband the way they hugged and kissed. Well, they left in a limo an hour ago. She was dressed up like some kind of trashy girl. I overheard that short fellow tell the chauffeur to drive them to the Nile Club. Thank you. No need, young man. I never liked that Darcy and that slimy stuck-up friend of her anyways. You're here to surprise her, but I think the surprise is on you. That slimy guy has been over to see your wife a few times a week, and he stayed overnight too. I am sorry to tell you all that, the old woman said sadly. I thanked her again and left, not telling her that I already knew Darcy was a cheating witch. 35 minutes later, I stood watching Chad and Darcy on the dance floor having a good time. Or so it would appear. Chad would put his hand on Darcy's hips, but she would push him off. Her resistance to him was not surprising to me since I had been cold to her and also been avoiding her. It was too late to save her virtue. She was a lying, cheating wife. She and her boyfriend were going to crash and burn. I decided that we were done, not just for my well-being, but also for those poor people that were caught up in Gen 1's web of lies. Chad and Darcy went to their booth where they had a heated argument which I could make out due to the club's background noise. Then, she slapped him and gathered her things as I moved quickly to them. She stood up, yelled something to Chad, turned around, and bumped into me. Her eyes grew wide in shock and fear. Hello, my dear wife. I missed you at your apartment. Fortunately, your neighbor told me where you are, and even what you have been up to, I said with a heated edge. Honey, Henry, please let's leave here so we can talk about this privately, she begged as she began to tear up. Leave Chad by himself? No, he must be here to discuss events, past, present, and future. I certainly don't want to talk at that den of iniquity that is your apartment. Here is a good place as any as there is so much for the three of us to discuss. Now sit down. I insist, I said with a surprisingly calm voice as I gently pushed her back into her seat. I sat across from them with an amused look on my face as I noticed the look on Chad's face, which changed from surprise to a smirk. The arrogant jerk didn't know what was about to happen to him and his girlfriend. My name is Chadwick. Only my friends call me Chad. So what now, you dumb jock? Are you going to beat me up again? He sneered. Again? Don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen you before in my life. I'm actually here about my soon-to-be ex-wife and Gen 1 too. Oh, and I'm not dumb. My college GPA was 3.9 even while playing football. Yeah, and mine was 4.6, so you are still dumb. But that's not why you're here. You want to confirm what you suspected to be true, and that would be your wife might be having an affair. Yes, it is true. I have been her lover since the month after you both went steady your junior year in high school. Yeah, that is right. I've been screwing your girl for years, and she loved it. Big muscle-bound ape couldn't keep his woman satisfied in bed, so she went to me. Hurts, doesn't it? You being a long-term cuck. Oh, Mr. Pro Bowl got cucked. That should be big news tomorrow morning, Chad said before he broke into a hysterical laugh. Actually, you and Darcy will be the big headline tomorrow, I said with a chuckle. He looked at me with a puzzled look. Oh no, this can't be happening. Please, Henry, it's not like you think. Please let me explain, she pleaded as cried. Shut up, I'm talking to Chad. Now Chadlicker, why all this? Why did you destroy my love and marriage to Darcy? I've never seen you before in my life, I said. It perplexed me, and I had to have an answer before I could get peace and move on with my life. Don't call me that name. My real name is Chadwick, he said furiously. He pulled out a picture and laid it on the table. It was an old picture of a high school freshman. The small kid had acne and nerd eyeglasses. Is this you? If so, I still don't get the reason for your actions. It is me. When I was a freshman, I was walking from gym class. I had humiliated again. Those a-holes pulled my shorts down in front of everyone. I was walking to my next class crying when you and 5 other football apes approached me on the sidewalk. My head was down, and I bumped into you guys. You jerks picked me up and dropped into the trash can, then walked away laughing about it. That's when I went from humiliated to angry. I devoted myself to getting revenge on you, even to the point of trying to get your wife pregnant with my baby. She kept up with birth control. Too bad, he said with a crazed look on his face. What? You mean to tell me that you destroyed my marriage over something that happened years ago? Why revenge on just me? I was baffled. You were the team captain, the BMOC, the future pro football star, and you loved Darcy. I had to maximize the blast yield. Yeah, I beat you, Mr. Superstar. This is revenge of the nerds on steroids. He howled in laughter so loud everyone in the club was staring at us. Please stop, Chad. No more. I can't take it anymore. I love Henry. I love Henry. Darcy sobbed uncontrollably to the point though she was going to hyperventilate. Okay, Chadwick, that's enough. I apologize to you with my utmost sincerity for what I did to you back in high school. It was mean and uncalled for. I always try to become a better person, and I am now on the boards of directors for an anti-bullying foundation. I paused to take a deep breath. Chad gloated by saying yes over and over again. Those being said, Chadlicker, please explain to me about Gen 1 and their overseas testing for this miracle vaccine. What did those poor people do to you and Darcy that warranted their increased health problems and even deaths? I said with a touch of sadness in my voice. Chad's gloat turned into a frown while Darcy put her hands to her face and she started to mumble something. How do you know about that? Oh, I see. My assistant must have leaked something. Well, it does not matter. You're a dumb jock, and I already won. The testing won't end for another year. The vaccine is a failure. I mean, seriously, people believe that in a vaccine that protects against all forms of cancer and even cures them? Gen 1 got tens of millions of dollars from investors from all over the world. Or should I say I got the bucks? Darcy did help, so I cut her in for 5%. All we had to do was keep the experiments going. Sure, the test subjects suffered, but you have to break a few eggs to make progress, right? Well, Chadlicker, I give up. You beat me, and Darcy is yours. I smiled as I pulled out a white handkerchief and began to wave it. Darcy screamed, "No, I love and want to be with you, Henry. However, there are other parties that you will now have to deal with. I chuckled. A group of people walked up to our booth, and they flashed badges and ID. Chadwick Melman, you were served. This packet contains a lawsuit for alienation of affection, said a young blonde process server who then handed him another packet. And this packet is a lawsuit on behalf of the test subjects. Have a nice evening. Darcy Heller, you are served with divorce papers, a poorly dressed fat man said as he handed Darcy a packet. Chadwick Melman and Darcy Heller, my name is Special Agent Thomas Jones of the FBI. I have warrants for your arrests. Also, I was told to inform you that an officer of the SEC will be visiting with you next week with a criminal complaint. Please stand up and put your hands behind your back. My name is Archibald Roseman of the State Department. I am informing you that we have received criminal extradition requests from Nigeria and India. I will be interviewing the two of you soon, the official said without emotion. And I was wearing a wire. Everything we said was recorded, I said with relish. As they cuffed Chad and Darcy, I felt a sense of relief, sadness, and joy all at the same time. As they led Chadlicker away, he threatened me. This isn't over, Heller. You think you won? Bullshit. I'll get you. I have money. I know people. You'll die. You hear? You're dead. Adios, Chadlicker. Send me a postcard from whatever hole you're living in, I said with a laugh. As Darcy was passed by me, she looked horrible. Henry, I am so sorry. I love you, she said as she passed out. I leaped to her side and held her in my arms. Someone call 911. Please hurry, I shouted. Darcy lay unconscious for 22 hours. The doctor said she had a panic attack and hyperventilated. She also probably had an emotional and mental collapse. I stayed by her hospital bed. Henry, my love. I heard her weakened voice. She was awake now. Now came the moment that I dreaded, which was the cutting of our marital and emotional ties. Hey Darcy, how are you doing? Should I get the doctor? I said with concern. No, I am so sorry for everything. I hurt you and destroyed us. You probably want the whole story, right? She softly said, and I nodded. Darcy told me what happened, and I grew more upset as she told her story. When she was a junior in high school, she was passing all of her classes with top grades except the Algebra 2 class where she was barely surviving. She needed straight A's if she was to get a full scholarship. Her dream was to help people by pursuing a degree in genetic engineering. Enter Chad, who was a classmate, and offered to tutor her. Chad was a brainy kid who was the favorite of his math and science teachers. All he asked in return was a little kissing and hugging. They spent a lot of time together. Finally, she took the final exam and got a C. She was depressed and cried into Chad's shoulder. He said he was a student aide for the math department and could change her grade, illegally of course. The price was giving him sex twice a week during the summer. He made her say things like how much she loved him and fake climax, and say how good of a lover he was. That's when her moral compass went bad until now. He graduated that summer, but not before he blackmailed her into more future sex. He had also taped their sexual liaisons with his face blurred and threatened to expose her fake math grade and her sexual activity. He owned her, and she knew it. She continued on. It wasn't all that bad being blackmailed into sex. There was a weird thrill to having secret forced sex with the school dork. I mean, what if people found out? That was a dark feeling that I enjoyed somewhat. Maybe the attraction was that we were both highly intelligent and liked science. Still, the guilt and the embarrassment were so overwhelming that I tried to block it out. I couldn't turn to anybody for help. When we went on dates, they were my refuge from reality, and I loved how you treated me and how you made me feel. I fell in love with you. Then we went to different colleges. I was lonely again. The guys at my school were only interested in having sex with a cheerleader, and they didn't care about me as a person. I broke up with my fourth college boyfriend and changed schools. She took a sip of water. Then we met again and went steady. Then Chad called out of the blue one day at the start of my senior year. He said could get me into the doctoral program at MIT with a scholarship. I also would get a paid internship of $65,000 a year at Gen 1. Once the vaccine was completed, we would make billions and be history book famous. You wouldn't have to play football anymore, and we could just kick back and have kids. Darcy frowned. All I had to do was be his cheerleader girlfriend at different events, help him in the lab, and have sex with him. But it turned out to be more than that. That's what hooker is, right? She takes money for sex. I gave into his lust and money and potential fame, and I ended up being his hooker. He used me sexually. During my senior year, I flew twice a month to Chad so I could service him. At first, it was a kind of a thrill to be doing dirty without being caught even though I hated him. After a short while, the thrill went away. It was just sex. No love. Darcy was now crying. Then we graduated and got married. He made me screw him 2 days before our wedding. Later, I got admitted to MIT. I worked at Gen 1 after classes. He put me to working with him on the vaccine, but after months of work and trials, we realized it would never work. Yet Chad kept taking money from investors and falsifying reports and data. I wanted to help people, not hurt them. I never knew what the real results were of the field testing since he supervised that on his own. I wanted to go to the authorities, but he threatened to expose me and pointed out that my marriage would be over. Then, yesterday, you showed up. As soon as I saw you, I knew the lies and deceptions were over. I was scared, but relieved at that. He would be correct, Darcy. Our marriage is over. I loved and trusted you. Why didn't you come to me with all this? Didn't you trust my love for you? Okay, I could have forgiven you for cheating on me in high school, but I can't forgive almost 6 years after that. Please, Henry, I love you so much. Can't you forgive me, please? She begged. I forgive you, Darcy, for what you did, but our love and trust are ashes. So our fairy tale marriage is gone. The football star and the cheer captain are ashes, she said bitterly as tears flowed freely down her face. Fairy tales are for little kids, and we are surrounded by the dark reality of adulthood. I will pay for your lawyer fees for the criminal and divorce cases. I am pursuing a fault divorce based on adultery and criminal actions. I plan to seek an annulment from the church based on lies and deception. I am giving you the house, your car, and a one-time alimony payment of $80,000. Keep the rings or pawn them off. I strongly suggest you take the deal. A kind of a deal has been worked out before last. If you plead guilty and testify against Chad, you will serve only 1 year in prison instead of the 15+ years. Again, I recommend you take the deal. As I stood up, I put on my coat. For what it's worth, I loved you, Darcy. I still do, maybe. You definitely disgust me. My parents tried to warn me about cheerleaders, actresses, and models. You were all three. I hope Mom and Dad don't tell me, I told you so. I don't ever want to see or talk to you again. I wish you the very best for the future. Goodbye. As I walked out, she cried loudly. She might have tried to wave goodbye, but I doubt it. Her left arm was hooked up to an IV, and her right wrist was police handcuffed to the side rail. It finally got to me later as I was driving to the airport. I stopped along the way at a Catholic church and went inside. As I sat in a pew, I broke down and cried. Over the months, my parents, siblings, and friends were there for me always. The press mostly ignored my personal troubles. Maybe being a popular athlete does help sometimes. My emotional and mental state was in a dark place. I had gone from Darcy and me starting a family to divorce. For the next 6 years, I focused intensely on football. I became a conference MVP, made the Pro Bowl a few times, got a new contract totaling $3.8 million a year, and got my law degree during the off-seasons. My specialty was entertainments and sports. I wanted to be an agent after I retired. What about Darcy and Chadlicker? Darcy became a witness for the prosecution, then served 1 year in federal prison. Her testimony was never used since Chad posted $1 million bail and disappeared to who knows where. I asked Dad to contact Mr. Deswine in order to track Chadlicker down. I wasn't done with that maggot. Later, my dad told me that when the inmates found out that Darcy was a cheerleader and college girl, and what crime she had committed, and that she cheated on her husband who was a player on their favorite team, they gave her a bad beating. She finished her time in the prison hospital in solitary. I felt bad and drove to the prison, but she refused to see me. As for my love life, pro athletes do attract a lot of available females, both single and married. I avoided the married ones. Darcy was always in my head. Cheating sucks. Then on the day of my 29th birthday, it was serendipity when I met a woman who would change my life. She made me believe that it was possible to find a good, virtuous woman. Her name was Melody Mae Cooper. About 2 years later, after Henry's divorce, as he packed his bags, he reflected on the last few days. Chad, the egotistical genius runt who had a years-long affair with his now ex-wife Darcy, had finally been brought to justice. His revenge came about due to the coordinated efforts of the Justice Department, Interpol, and Global Security Corporation, GLO-SEC, a private dark security company hired by him. It turned out that Chad had been hiding out in Argentina. There had been a flood of sightings and tips about Chad, but finally one bore fruit. A former classmate of Chad had reported seeing him in a private club in Argentina. Chad was making out with a teenaged girl while his 2 bodyguards sat nearby. That set into motion a joint task force to apprehend Chad. Since Argentina has a policy of not allowing its citizens and guests to be extradited, Glow SEC had to do a dark ops to get Chad out of Argentina. His downfall came from mercenaries Bobby and Wild Bill, plus an excommunicated Amish girl called Faith and a red-haired ex-cheerleader named Bree. During the operation week, Henry had become good friends with the odd group of mercenaries and envied their warm family relationship. Bobby and Wild Bill were in their 50s while their wives were 19 and already had a baby each. Despite the vast age differences, there was affection, protectiveness, and happiness. A far cry from what he ever had with his wife, now ex-wife, Darcy. They have what I never had with Darcy, he glumly thought as he shed a tear. He was startled from his sad thoughts by Bree's voice. Sorry, are you ready to go to the airport? Bree softly asked. The girl was a paradox to him. She was a teen sex slave, mom, wife, martial artist, former cheerleader, and now a mercenary who just completed her first mission. Now she was driving the two of them to the airport. Weird. Yeah, sure. Coming right down, he quickly said while wiping the tear off. The four gave him big hugs and invited him to visit them in Texas again, and also offered their ranches in Wyoming. He promised he would indeed visit them again. As Bree and he got into the Escalade, Wild Bill shouted out, "You should have let me drop that Chad out of the helicopter and let the maggot do a belly flop into the Atlantic Ocean for what he tried to do to our girls. You're no fun, hitman." But then how could I get the pleasure of sending him a Christmas card and a soap basket to his jail cell every year and is trying not to drop his soap bar in the prison shower for the rest of his life? Everyone laughed, and the Glow SEC folks waved goodbye. Bree drove him the 95-minute trip to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. During the drive, Bree asked him questions about Darcy and what happened to his marriage. He asked her questions about her life as sex slave from the car wash kidnapping to the present. He could feel a bond between them. If circumstances were different, he would have asked the sexy, hot-tempered teen vixen out on a date, and he felt she would have accepted it. To their regret, they arrived at the airport. They got his bags out of the trunk, then Bree handed him an envelope. "This is the name and number to my older cousin Melody May Cooper, who lives near your condo. She has been working 2 part-time jobs since her Army officer husband was killed in Afghanistan. She wants to quit one or both of the jobs and become a personal assistant while working on her college degree at night. With your pro football job and the related public relations stuff, I thought you might need the help. She is honest and hardworking." "So was she a cheerleader, actress, or model?" I asked warily. "None of them. My cousin was a majorette and a scholar," Bree said proudly. "A major what?" "A majorette is a girl who twirls a baton while dancing to the music from the school band during halftime." "Seriously? You're a football player and you don't about majorettes? They wear a shiny leotard, flesh-colored tights, and dance shoes. So does that ring a bell?" Bree said exasperatedly. "Well, the football team is in the locker room during halftime," I said defensively. Men, you be safe, okay?" Bree said as she gave me a tight hug. Her red hair smelled like strawberries as I hugged her back. "I hope your cousin is as sexy as you. Look, if Bobby ever decides to sell your hot sex slave body, you give me a call," I said as we broke the embrace. "You are so cute and very funny. There is no girl as hot and sexy as me. Now you get going, hitman, before I kick your butt for trying to lure a happily married sex slave away from her mercenary psycho husband master," she said with a twinkle in her eyes. She was laughing as I quickly turned away and walked to gate security. What a woman. That girl would exhaust me if we were a pair. She could also do that martial arts stuff on me and really kick my butt if her gun and knife-obsessed husband didn't kill me first. Fortunately, Bree was not the only girl out there. A professional athlete always has access to hot babes, and the one-night stands do provide relief. Of course, safe sex is a must. No STDs or babies need complicate my recovery from Darcy. Another part of my divorce recovery was increasing my focus and energy into becoming a better pro football player. It wasn't long before I was among the top 10 leaders in tackles, interceptions, and pass deflections. As a defensive back, I was second in sacks and tackles for losses, plus I was first in interceptions and pick sixes. My performance made me the second highest paid cornerback in the league. Yet after all of that, I wasn't really happy. Basically, I was lonely. I lived alone in a luxury condo and ate out. Hell, the condo only had a bed, a nightstand, a folding table and chair, television, and a recliner chair for furniture. Sure, I hung out with friends, but not that much since most of them were married with kids. Since I was a pro athlete, the supply of dates and one-night stands was available, but I didn't feel any real attractions and feelings towards any of those women. During the off-season, I went home and stayed with my parents. Sometimes I went hunting, horseback riding, or took trips around the world. Still, I was lonely, and I missed Darcy even though she was a lying, cheating witch. So after a couple of months since the Argentinian mission, I called Melody May Cooper. I really need someone to take care of my personal stuff I didn't want to do, and leaving me time to start law school. Hello? A tired woman's voice said. Hi there. My name is Henry Heller. Your cousin Bree referred me to you. Are you still available for employment? I asked. There was a long pause. Then she spoke in an angry voice. I am not a sex slave, escort, prostitute, or a 304. I am a woman of good moral character. So I don't know what my crazy cousin Bree might have told you. But stop, please. I am not calling about that. I am a professional athlete and plan to start work on a law degree. I need you as my personal assistant and housekeeper, I said hurriedly. My oral presentation explained what her duties and responsibilities would entail in the position, which was basically as a well-paid gopher. She listened and in an apologetic tone responded, I am sorry, Mr. Heller. It's just that since our family and friends found out that Bree really wasn't kidnapped and decided to voluntarily become some sex slave, it has set us on edge. She has gone from good girl to the family black sheep. Yes, I would like to meet with you about the position. We agreed to meet at Oregano's Italian restaurant for lunch the next day. The next day, I stood up in awe of Melody May Cooper as she approached our table. She was about 5 feet 7 inches tall, a little stocky, D-cup breasts, toned body. Her hips seemed a bit wide, and long wavy red hair. Her outfit was a medium blue, sleeveless, knee-length dress with 3-inch blue pumps. She was not a beauty queen like my ex-wife Darcy, but Melody had more of a nice cute girl next door kind of look. I was immediately smitten with her as she extended her hand and said hello with a sweet smile. Most of the conversation was about her. Her husband was killed in action and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously. She had an associate arts degree in accounting, but couldn't find work, so she worked 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet. She waited tables at a country club and was a part-time event coordinator at a local hotel. I asked her about her activities. Melody said she used to be a baton twirler and won awards at many competitions. She was very active in her church. I told her she had the job and to report to my condo at 8 a.m. the next morning. As I drove home, I realized that we never talked about me, and I was strangely happy about that. The woman was a godsend. She cleaned my condo, did my budget, ran errands, made my travel arrangements, suggested investment ideas, and coordinated my calendar, and so on. She even promised to build me a website. My fondness grew for this amazing woman. So after a few days, I asked her out on a date. At first, she refused, saying that she didn't want to ruin our professional relationship, but after a bit, she gave in to going on a date with me at this expensive Italian restaurant. At 6 p.m., I showed up at her apartment in my Armani suit and with flowers in hand. She opened the door, and my disappointment was noticeable. She was dressed in a Brad Paisley concert t-shirt, old ragged jeans, and bare feet. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her face was teary-eyed. I'm so sorry, Henry, but I can't go out tonight. I tried to reach you. I left a voicemail. I really wanted to go out with you, she said sadly. No, it's my fault. I turned off my phone during a team meeting and forgot to turn it back on. I'm sorry. So why can't you go? I asked. The sitter canceled because she had to take her mom to the emergency room. Sitter? Why do you have a? As if on cue, the sound of children's voices was heard, and there appeared 2 kids. A 3-year-old girl sucking on her thumb peered cautiously from behind Melody's leg. Next to them was a 7-year-old boy who immediately became excited to see me. Mom, it's the hitman, he said, jumping up and down. Eddie, stop that and apologize to my boss. He is not a criminal. I'm sorry for what my son said. Yes, I have 2 kids. This is my daughter Casey and my son Edward Jr., she said in a stern voice. Nice to meet you kids, I said with a big smile. But Mom, he's awesome. I got his poster in my room, the lad said with enthusiasm. I am afraid he is correct. I am a defensive back with the local pro football team. What? Bree said you worked in the sports and entertainment field. She lied to me. I don't date football players, she said with deep emotion. Why? When I was 14, a couple of football boys were mean to me because I wouldn't let them feel me up and have sex with them. But you have to admit that I am not your typical football player. I really am, as you have seen me over the last few days. Okay, that's true. You are a good man, but I still don't have a sitter. Well, why don't we take the kids with us? I'll cancel the restaurant, and we can go to Amazing Tom's Family Pizza place. The kids immediately began shouting their approval. Seeing she was outvoted, Melody went to go get changed into blouse, denim skirt, and flats. The rest of the evening was a blast, and Melody laughingly remarked that I was a big kid as I played with the kids on the different games and rides. When the kids went into the jungle gym, Melody and I kissed for the first time. This was the night that I realized that I loved Melody and her kids. Our relationship developed quickly. I felt a new life had developed for me. Memories about Darcy faded and were replaced by new ones with Melody. With Darcy, everything was about her. It was like dating a narcissistic celebrity. With Melody, it was like being with a sweet, kind, loving, tough, self-confident woman who made me feel loved and relaxed every moment we were together. After our 7th date, she told me I was going to get lucky that night after seeing a play. I did. Our first time making love together was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Melody was a lover who willingly responded to all my desires for lovemaking and even supplied a few ideas of her own. Other nights of lovemaking followed, and I encouraged her to suggest what she wanted in the bedroom. She liked both tender and rough lovemaking. Melody May became my lover, best friend, and not just my personal assistant. For months after our first date, we moved her and the kids out of that crappy apartment complex and into my luxury condo. I was now in a family environment, and I loved every moment of it. Melody and the kids were a hit with my parents. They loved them and constantly told me that I hit the jackpot in terms of women. My mom and dad always wanted to babysit for us. My brother and sister also liked my new family. My sister Caitlin slugged me on the arm and told me to marry Melody before some other guy stole her away from me. I cringed because that made me think of Darcy again, but my sis was right. I had to make a move. So on Christmas Eve at my parents' neighborhood Christmas party, I proposed in front of family and friends. Melody said yes, and in the following June, we were married in the same Catholic church that my parents were married in, and their children were baptized. 8-year-old Eddie was my best man, and his 4-year-old sister Becky was the flower girl. The groomsmen were a few of my close teammate friends, my brother, and a cousin. Bree was the maid of honor since she was the person who put us together, and Melody's dad Tom, a retired Marine colonel, walked her down the aisle. As we exited the church to cheering and flying rice, I spotted a brunette-haired woman standing across the street next to a tree. She was wearing a big straw hat and large sunglasses and holding a hanky. I thought it might have been Darcy as my brother gave me a big hug. Then my bride, the kids, and I got into the limo and went to the reception. One kiss for my bride, and the mystery of the woman stranger was forgotten. Melody had never been outside the United States, and so she picked our honeymoon itinerary. We spent 2 weeks traveling to England, France, and Italy. We were supposed to also go to Greece and Egypt, but we missed the kids, and they missed us too. So we headed home. The next several months were happy ones. Melody, the kids, the new big house, and my football career were in perfect harmony. At first, it was domestic bliss, something I doubted I would have had even if Darcy didn't cheat on me. The love, trust, and closeness in my new family made me realize that I had completely gotten past the Darcy chat affair and was now moving on with my life. There was a huge difference between Darcy and Melody. Being with Darcy was like being a celebrity linked to a diva. The relationship was more about appearances and being seen by the fans. My relationship with Melody allowed me to be relaxed, playful, and just be my real self. I found true happiness and love with Melody. As the old saying goes, the honeymoon was over. When the football preseason began, Melody came with the kids to the first game. After the game, she was a different person. As the days turned into weeks, she began asking me if I might retire at the end of the season. Retire? Retire? You're funny. I'm at the top of my career. Why would you want me to? Oh yeah, I get it. You're messing with me. Funny honey, I said while chuckling. She didn't smile and seemed even more upset. She didn't let up. Finally, a month later, I blew a fuse. Why do you keep telling me to retire? Enough already? I yelled. The kids and I need you. You could get badly injured or even die out there, she yelled back at me. Damn it, Mel. I'm safer on the football field than driving on city streets. Football pays the bills, including the big house we live in, I shouted. You are so selfish. I don't care about the money. We want you, she said softly with tears flowing. Arg, you're driving me crazy. I'm sleeping at my parents' tonight, I said in exasperation. It was our first big fight, and I didn't sleep a wink that night. Why was she doing this to me? The big football bucks gave her and the kids all kinds of nice expensive things, including that expensive engagement and wedding ring set. Melody got out of a dumpy apartment into luxury housing, and also the private school for the kids. Crazy, right? Then it happened, and my world began to crack. The next day, the team had just finished morning practice, and I was getting dressed after showering. From there, I wanted to go watch game tapes on our next opponent. I guess I was kind of trying to avoid going home. My cell phone chimed, which meant I had a text message from Frank, who was an old friend from high school. Dude, call me. Melody is cheating on you. The deja vu feelings of anger, hate, and sadness filled my heart and mind as I speed dialed Frank, who answered on the first ring. Dude, you gotta get to McNally's pub like now. I was driving down Main and saw your wife hugging some guy and kissing him on the cheek. Then they went inside. I swung back around, and they're sitting down just now. They look really friendly with each other. You need to get down here now. A minute later, my red Corvette sped out of the parking lot. I was filled with rage over being cucked again. My counselor said that even though I suspected that Darcy was cheating on me, I didn't do anything about it because my ego and blind faith wouldn't let me. Well, this time I was going to take direct physical action. I didn't care about the consequences. My dad had put 2/3 of my assets and our mansion into the family trust and overseas accounts, so lawsuits would not hurt me that much. As for criminal action, I'm glad my family and friends have influence. I parked and did a fast and furious walk into the restaurant, blowing past the hostess. I immediately saw Melody and some guy sitting in a booth on the far side. His right side rear was all I could see of him, and Melody had both of her hands holding his. I strode angrily towards them, picking up a dinner knife along the way. Melody spotted me when I was halfway across the room. She smiled and waved at me. Was she about to flout her affair in my face? Then she saw the look of rage that I had, and her happy greeting turned into fright. She got out of her chair and took a few steps towards me. Henry, calm down. It's not what you think. He is she said quickly in fear. She put her hands on my chest. That's a common cheater cliche, I roared as I tried to go around her. Her lover was getting out of the booth. Good. Then I stopped in shock. The man was wearing a marine t-shirt, and his body appearance was horrible. The left side of his face was badly scarred and was missing most of his ear. There was a prosthetic arm attached to his left elbow. His left eye didn't seem to track well. Henry, dear, this is my cousin Lieutenant Paul Henson, U.S. Marine Corps. He came back from Afghanistan 10 months ago. Paul, this is my loving husband Henry, Melody said with barely contained anger at me. I felt so ashamed at my actions. I doubted the fidelity of my wife, and I almost assaulted a real American hero. Hi, Paul. I am very glad to meet you, I said as earnestly as I could. Paul took his time, like he was trying to formulate what he was going to say. It's a pleasure to meet you, Hitman. I am a big fan of yours, he said slowly while slurring his words a bit. Thank you. I am a big fan of our servicemen and women who are the real heroes, I said sincerely. Thanks. You must really be hungry since you brought your own fork, he said with a twinkle in his right eye. Yeah, I guess so, I mumbled. It was fortunate that I had picked up the fork by accident. Was that a subconscious act or divine intervention? We sat down and ordered food. We had a good time, except for the fact that my wife was barely speaking to me. Paul and I had much in common. He played some football and baseball in high school and college. We also both liked sports cars and argued about Corvettes versus Mustangs. After a couple of hours, Melody noticed that Paul was getting tired and said she would take him back to the hospital. We did some selfies, and then we helped him to her van. I promised him that I would get him 2 tickets to each of my team's games whenever he wanted to come. That made his day. My wife hugged me and whispered into my ear, "This isn't over yet, you jerk." Then she got into the van and drove off. Damn, I was in big trouble. When Melody got home, I was sitting on my favorite chair in the living room and drinking a Long Island. She sat across from me and took a sip out of the martini I had already made for her. We just sat there for a while, not looking at each other. Then she spoke first. "We can't go on like this. I love you, but," she said softly, "I know we need help. I have trust issues, and you have anxiety over my job. I love you too, and am willing to do anything to keep us together," I said. "I know that, darling. Let's forgive each other starting now." "Agreed," I said with a smile. I went over to her and kissed her. We shared a hot, passionate kiss. I picked her up and carried her to the bedroom. We laid there in each other's arms and fell asleep. My mom recommended a husband and wife team of counselors, which was very unusual. We met separately and together. I think we both got a lot out of these sessions. It helped relieve the tension between Melody and me. The counseling went on once every 2 weeks for almost a year, even though we really didn't need them after 4 months. We both felt that the additional sessions enhanced our marriage. To help relieve her anxiety, I agreed to play for 3 more years only. That gave Melody a finite number to look forward to. I also said I would talk to Coach and tell him that I didn't want to do punt returns and kickoffs anymore. Coach didn't have problem with it, as we had a talented second-year player who wanted the jobs. As for my trust issues, Melody always gave me her schedule and who she would be with. She got a bookkeeping job at the church where she worked in an office full of women. Since we were enrolling the kids in the church's K-8 school, this made sense too. When our counseling session ended, Melody and I celebrated by going to Hawaii for 5 days and 4 nights. When we were packing, I saw her put one of her twirling batons into her big suitcase. When I asked if she planned on putting on a show there, she responded by asking me to use my imagination. Our sex life was great. The "knock you up" comment turned out to be quite prophetic, as we both agreed that was when our daughter Rebecca was conceived. At some point in time, we have to return to the world of reality. We had talked a lot, and we achieved a mutual sense of love and devotion that we had never had before. We felt better prepared to rejoin our lives as spouses and parents. Rebecca was born 9 months after our Hawaii trip. It was a long and difficult delivery. The doctor recommended against having any more children. It didn't matter that much to us. Little Becky was a beautiful gift to us. We became a closer family, and I enjoyed every minute of it. We took family trips, including trips to Wyoming and Texas to visit Wild Bill, Bobby, and Bree. While the kids went crazy happy with horseback riding and playing with the farm animals, Melody didn't particularly like Bobby and Wild Bill's lifestyles. Melody did not care for men who had sex slaves, and she let me know about that opinion. The mistake I made was making a bad joke when I said that she was my sex slave. I got an immediate slap, and I was denied sex for 3 days. Never again with the bad jokes. I started law school after the season was over, specializing in sports and entertainment. It was difficult doing something cerebral when I made my living doing a violent sport, but Mel said I thrived on adversity. Her words were prophetic, for I was about to face the darkest moments of my life. When I graduated in the top 10% of my law school class, it was another moment in the greatest year of my life. We had just won the Super Bowl. My wife and 3 kids were doing fantastic. We had a pile of money in the bank. Melody and I were about to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary next year. I was set to retire at the end of this season. Our lives were perfect, and our family and friends agreed with me. Can you say hubris? The call came in while I was working out in the team weight room. Melody never picked up the kids from vacation Bible school. I grabbed my stuff and ran out the door just as a police car pulled up. An officer got out and asked me if I was Henry Heller. I said yes with apprehension. "Mr. Heller, I regret to inform you that your wife Melody was seriously injured in a traffic accident. I can give you a ride to the hospital, or you can follow me." He rushed me to the hospital with lights and siren, which made me think that her injuries were worse than serious, and she was unconscious. I was right, and I won't go into details, but the doctor said she wasn't going to make it. I held her hand as I cried and told her over and over again how much I loved her, and that she had to get well because the kids and me needed her. After 20 minutes, she squeezed my hand and passed away. The funeral was a huge event in my small hometown with hundreds of people in attendance. There was no end to the love and sympathies that were given to the kids and me. The governor, my team, and a few Hollywood celebrity friends of mine showed up. A pregnant Bree, her husband Master Bobby, and Wild Bill also gave me a brief moment of happiness by their attendance. It was good to see them again. Melody was laid to rest in the Heller family cemetery located about 40 yards behind our ancestral family mansion built a few years before the Civil War. Near her grave is an ancestor who was a Confederate general and his daughter who helped co-found the first women's college in the state. I had showed Melody the place 2 years ago. She remarked how lovely and peaceful it was to her. I had jokingly responded that we should plan to move in someday, but not too soon. Little did I know then that someday would become today. After the service, we walked back to the mansion. A pregnant Bree had her arm around me while Wild Bill was carrying Rebecca and my mother-in-law held Casey. Eddie held my hand. Later, after the reception, I looked out my second-floor bedroom window towards the cemetery. I saw a brunette-haired woman wearing black, a white hat, and sunglasses standing next to Melody's grave. She looked familiar, but I just turned away and took a nap. Both of my grandmothers, my mom, Melody's mom, and even Bree offered to pitch in to help with our kids who were not taking their mom's death very well. They all took a week at a time, and their help was greatly appreciated. 2 weeks later, I was back on the field again. It was a mistake. I began to play out of control and with excessive brutality. With a minute and a half left in the 5th game, and with us ahead by 17 points, I intercepted the ball. Instead of kneeling with the ball, I ran it back for almost 20 yards. Then I was tackled high and low. My right leg buckled, and I crashed to the ground. They put me on a gurney and took me to the hospital. The massive injury brought my pro football career to a sudden end. So to summarize my life to that point in time, I went from Mount Olympus to the dark depths. I was a 31-year-old widower with 3 kids aged 11, 7, and 3. My career, which I started at age 8, was over. More importantly, I missed my wife every second of the days that followed her death. I had no purpose in life anymore, and even if I did, Melody wasn't there to share it. So I continued my descent to the Stygian depths. My leg was in a cast, so I had to use crutches. I began to drink heavily. I would shut myself up in my bedroom or in my den while ignoring the kids. My parents took my kids to counseling because they were also doing poorly. They needed me, yet I couldn't even help myself. My parents, grandparents, siblings, pastor, and friends all came to encourage me, to no avail. Another low point came days later. My mom threatened to take my kids away from me, as she said that they should not see their father in a perpetual state of drunkenness. I told her I didn't care anymore. The next morning, I woke up to find the kids and some of their toys and clothes were gone. My mom left a note saying they had taken my kids to go stay with them. Good. I wasn't even taking care of them anyway. My parents had my general power of attorney. They were great parents and would be again. After sticking a new bottle of Jack in Roe pocket, I went to the gun safe and pulled out my great-grandfather's M1911 A1 from the Second World War. Then I sat down in my recliner chair and began to drink heavily while looking at a picture of me when I was a 10-year-old football player. The little punk never knew what bad shit was about to befall him years later. I racked a .45 caliber round in the pistol and resumed drinking. My gaze was now on my wedding picture. Melody and I looked so happy. She saved me from doubt and depression, and I couldn't save her. I was crap. I love you, Melody, now and forever. I'll see you in a few seconds, honey, I said softly as my pistol's muzzle came up, and sometime along the way to death, I drifted into darkness. Death did not claim me that night. Instead, I woke up with a female voice yelling at me. Her voice increased the pain in my hungover mental state. I looked up, and it was Bree. Hey, scum sucker. I heard you turned from a hitman to a shitman. Now I know what people have been saying is true. You helped rescue me down in Argentina. Now you can't even save your own sorry carcass, the red-haired 25-year-old shouted. Bree? Is it really you, Bree? You came back for me. I mumbled. Of course it's me, Dunce. What the hell have you been doing to yourself and your kids? She roared. Now, I was awake, painfully so. Now wait a minute. I don't like your tone of... I started angrily. Slap. She slapped me so hard I saw stars. Bree, what the F? I mumbled. Slap. Again. I saw stars, even more so. I tried to tackle her in a fit of anger, but I ended up face down on the floor. She kicked me in the side, which hurt like hell. Pathetic. A pregnant cheerleader just kicked your sorry drunk butt, she yelled. I slowly rose to a sitting position. I leave you for a few months, and you look like shit. Get yourself up and into the kitchen. We're gonna have a talk. Now, I said. Before I do a spin kick upside your head, she yelled. Yelling? Why does she have to yell? I staggered to the kitchen where Bree had black coffee waiting for me. The talk began, which I wish I could avoid. Do you know that the man that killed your wife was driving on a suspended license because he already had 4 DUI? On his 3rd DUI, he badly injured an elderly couple. And you know how much time he served for all that? 21 days of home detention. Why? Because his dad happens to be a senator and his mom's family owns the county. So what are you gonna do about it? It took a minute for all that to sink in. Suddenly, I felt red-hot anger spread throughout my body. That man destroyed my world. He had to pay. I needed to destroy him. Also, I was angry and upset that a pregnant sex slave was telling to man up. I'll file a lawsuit. Take him for everything, I said with fury. Bree laughed. That won't work with this piece of crap. He's 22, has no job, and lives with his rich mommy and daddy. He has a trust fund that he will inherit at age 30. That being said, do you want Glow SEC to take care of your needs? Yes, but do you mean that Glow SEC would? He'll just do it again. More people will be hurt and killed. We guarantee customer satisfaction or your money back, Bree said with an evil smile. Okay, just do it. I'll call my dad and let him know, I said slowly. Was this right? A death for a death? I looked up and saw my wedding picture. I felt the guilt flow away. You need a shower and a shave, Bree said with a mischievous look as she grabbed my right hand and pulled me to the bathroom. She shaved me, and after that I was in the shower. Bree stayed with me for 3 weeks. She put me on a healthy diet and exercise plan. I began to come back to life. With her help, the exuberance of my 3 kids, and support from the rest of my family. My mom and sister were not happy about a flirty, pregnant cheerleader living with me, but they also saw the value of having Bree in the house. I was mending, and that was what was important to them. My dad found my situation amusing, and Bree and he even flirted a bit, but that was all. As for my kids, they immediately warmed up again to their Aunt Bree. For all her tomboy personality, Bree was also a great mom. She could cook, play with the kids, and make them do their homework. My daughters loved it when they did the girly stuff with her, and my son Eddie loved his aunt for teaching him martial arts. He added martial arts to his love of football and baseball. All things come to an end. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed that Bree was becoming sadder each day. She spent an increasing amount of time on the phone talking to Bobby, her 2 kids, and her sisters Emma and Sophia. Add in the mood swings since Bree was almost 6 months pregnant. I knew I had to send her back to her real home. 3 days later, a cab came to take her to the airport. Bree said it would be too hard for us if I drove her there. The kids and Bree hugged and kissed. We hugged, and Bree asked a mysterious question. "Do you ever think of Darcy?" That floored me. There was an awkward pause before I responded. "Rarely, Bree. That lying, cheating ship sailed years ago. She betrayed and humiliated me. One of my best days was when I got the news that her lover Chad got shanked in the prison showers and ended up horizontal in a pauper's grave," I growled. Now. A churchman like you should be about forgiveness and compassion. Somehow, if things were reversed, I think Darcy would have forgiven you and stayed with you. Why are you saying all of this? Serendipity in a grocery store, my friend. I'll call you, let you know I made it home safely. Then she gave me a hug and whispered into my ear, "By the way, it's done." Huh? What's done? A peck on the cheek, and she was gone. I would see her during vacation trips to Texas and Wyoming. When I turned on the nightly news, I learned that the drunken punk who killed my Melody was in a coma from injuries sustained when his car wrapped itself around a tree the previous night. He was high on alcohol and drugs. Strangely enough, his airbag failed to deploy, and he didn't have his seatbelt on. He would stay in a coma for a few months before kicking the bucket. Oh well, never drink and drive. As I began to regain steam in the voyage of life, I became a sports and entertainment agent attorney. I built a new office in my mansion so I could also care for my 3 kids and take care of business. So I became Mr. Mom with my kids. I hired a college student named Ursula as a nanny to help, which worked out when I had to travel. Ursula was a beautiful foreign student from Sweden, and my kids took to her easily. No, I did not get it on with the nanny. My first client was neither a guy nor a football player. She was a 15-year-old phenom figure skater named Alexis Catherine Ellington, ACE, get it? Now, I know what you're thinking, which is how could a 4-time Pro Bowl football player risk losing man points taking in a girl who does figure skating? Victor Deswine, CEO of Glow SEC, himself called me and asked me as a personal favor to him to sign his grandniece. I owed him, Bobby, Wild Bill, and the rest of Glow SEC big favors, so I said yes. What a nightmare it turned out to be. Ace was a very talented young skater who had the potential to make the Olympic team. However, she made Bree look like calm. Ace was way too wild. Think of the BB doll character, played by Lynn Holly Johnson, in the James Bond movie in For Your Eyes Only and Multiply by 10. Ace was an ice princess with the personality of a foul-mouthed waitress in a dive bar. Yes, Alexis was extremely talented who could do a triple axel, whatever that is, with ease according to what many experts told me, but her lack of discipline and steady focus would keep her from even making the team. She also flirted with a lot of guys, especially older men like me. Now I understood why no agent would touch her. To make a long story short, I laid down the law to her, and with determined effort, I got her turned around. She won silver at Worlds and gold in the Olympics. Later, she went to Hollywood and became a famous actress and advertising spokeswoman. She got married and named her first son after me. And yes, she still flirts with me whenever we see each other. Because of my work with Ace, I became the agent who took all the difficult athletes. Within 2 years, I was an agent to 5 football players, 2 basketball players, 1 guy and 1 girl, a hockey player, and 2 female pro tennis players. I also made appearances for charities and other events. Life was great for the kids and me. Then one day, I got a phone call that would cause me to have another serious change in my life. Hello, this Henry Heller. Hi Henry, this is your old football coach Chuck Yarnell. Hey coach, how's it going? I happily responded. Quite well actually. I'm not the football coach anymore. I am the school principal, but please call me Chuck, he said warmly. Chuck it is then. What can I do for you? The school and the boosters would like to honor you by retiring your jersey number at halftime of the homecoming game 4 weeks from now. Our head coach would like you to address the team before the game. Would you accept the honor? To say I was speechless at first would be quite correct. The request made me very emotional. I was in my mid-30s, and it seemed too early to have my jersey retired. I pulled myself together and said, Yes, I would like that very much. A month later, I was wearing my old letter jacket and standing on the 50-yard line as the president of the school board presented a commemorative plaque to me, and my old coach held up a copy of my old number 33 high school jersey. The band played the school fight song, and people were cheering. I had to dab my watery eyes with my handkerchief. Then I saw her, Darcy. She was wearing her old school letter jacket as she stood to the side of the cheerleaders. Chuck noticed my stare and gobsmacked look on my face. He leaned over to me and said, "I see you noticed our science department chairwoman. She has been quite a valuable asset to the school. She has been working here for over 8 years. 2 years ago, she was the state science teacher of the year. She also coached the girls to winning the state cheerleading championship." As we walked off the field, I was in a bit of a daze. I needed answers. How is this possible? Darcy spent almost a year in prison. How can she be teaching at a high school? How could you hire a criminal? I said heatedly. "Henry, I'm glad you asked that question. There are 4 reasons why I hired her. First, she has a doctorate from MIT, which leads to number 2, which is we were in desperate need for an AP science teacher. She was the only qualified applicant. The third reason is that we also needed a talented and determined coach for our then mediocre cheer squad. Again, Darcy was the only qualified candidate. Finally, she was convicted of an obstruction misdemeanor which the school board and the PTA could care less about, as they were more interested in getting a top science teacher for a high school located out in Podunk Town," he said with that slow southern drawl he would use with people that were angry and upset. "People like me, right now?" I knew he was trying to get me to calm down, which I realized I needed to do. I waited 10 seconds and calmly asked my next question. "Okay, I get it. Why didn't you tell me that Darcy worked here?" I asked. "Well, you didn't ask me, and this night is about you. Not her," he pointed out. Darcy. The backstabbing which almost destroyed my life. What are the odds that she would be here tonight? I said with exasperation. Actually, the odds were quite high considering that she was the one who first came up with the idea of honoring you to begin with, he smirked. Again, I was gobsmacked by another revelation. It was like I was on one of those reality television shows. My mouth opened and closed like a fish. Coach Chuck put a hand on my shoulder, and in that coach as a friend mentor voice softly said, "My wife Kelly and I have had long talks with Darcy. My wife was her cheer coach when Darcy was in high school, so she knows her better than anyone in this town, as Darcy's parents retired to Florida a few years ago. That disaster with Chad, the trial, and the divorce caused her to have a complete breakdown. When Darcy served her time, she deliberately started a fight with the toughest inmate so she could die in prison for her sins. Since Darcy was released, she has done everything to rebuild her life so she could become the best person possible. I will let her tell you the details." Coach could see the turmoil in me. "Look, Henry, about sins and religion. Aren't you one of us church people? If you are, isn't there something about forgiving those who hurt us? You both need forgiveness and compassion so that both of you can finally heal. That healing allows you to fully move on with your lives. Now, that's all I have to say to you. I gotta go circulate with the superintendent and the boosters. Enjoy the evening." Damn him. As much as I relished my burning hatred of Darcy, I knew he was right. Chuck had played with my heart and soul. That long-dead love for Darcy turned out to be actually dormant as I began to recall all the good times with Darcy until the day I found out that she was a lying, cheating 304. As I stood on the sidelines, I reminisced about my life with Darcy. I still remembered our first kiss when we were about 12. Actually, it was more like a peck as we were both so nervous. The end of the game air horn startled me. Our team won 49-17. I looked for the cheerleaders, and they were gathered around Darcy as she talked to them. Then she and the girls began to walk to the gym. I took a deep breath and released it slowly before fast walking after her. "Darcy, wait up," I shouted. She shook and stopped, but did not turn to face me. "Hi, Henry. What do you want?" Darcy said frostily as she stopped with her back to me. "Mrs. Heller, do you want us to stay with you?" A blonde cheerleader asked Darcy while giving me the evil eye. I noticed that the rest of the girls had also stopped and were now looking at us. I also noticed she had kept her married surname. "No, you girls go on ahead. I'll be there shortly." The blonde gave me a dirty look, but for other girls gave me flirty looks, including one girl who licked her lips suggestively. I was relieved as they left us. "Look, I was wondering if we maybe get together for coffee or—" I started to say, but I grew angry as she began to walk away from me. "Goodbye, hitman. You really were and still are a stuck-up. My condolences on the death of your one true love, Chad Lickman. I'm sure you can find yourself a new boyfriend if you spread your legs enough." I mocked her until she turned around and got in my face. Shut up. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. That man abused me for years. I had to grovel and satisfy that piece of shit and what are you smiling about? She yelled. She stopped shouting, and we stared at each other. Got you talking to me. I chuckled. You jerk, she spat out. Look, Darcy, a wise old man told me that leaving painful issues unresolved does not allow a person to fully move on with your life. The night in the hospital when you were under arrest, you talked to me, but I was so angry and vengeful that I didn't want to hear anything you said. I am sorry for that and would to correct that mistake. Please, I said with sadness and sincerity. We just stared at each other for a minute, and then she sighed and said, Okay, Henry, you win. I'll see you at Kelsey's tomorrow at 8 a.m. The next morning, I arrived at Kelsey's 15 minutes early and got us a table off in a corner. I wanted the meeting to be relaxed, so I wore a plain blue hoodie and blue jeans. I was excited when she came. Darcy wore a blue knee-length skirt, a pink sweater blouse, and pink leather flats. Overall, she still looked young and beautiful, even at age 35. We greeted each other, but we didn't hug. There was an icy tension in the air. I liked your choice of meeting place. Kelsey's Diner was the site of our first real date when we were sophomores, I said to break the ice. Yes, it was. I remember I was so nervous that night. I had never been on a date before. Being alone with a guy made me fearful that I wouldn't know to react if you tried to kiss me or do more. Also, I was afraid that I would say or do the wrong things and kill the evening. But I knew deep down that I was with someone I really liked and trusted, and that the evening would be okay, she said slowly and with deep emotion. Believe me that I was nervous that night too. It worked out though. 2 weeks later, you were wearing my letter jacket. I was so happy that you were my girl, I said with a little smile. Yes, I was on cloud nine to be with you too. Then, at the beginning of our senior year, all of it began to fall to hell over a 7-year period. One moment, I was the cheerleader captain, honor student, girlfriend to the most popular boy on campus, and homecoming queen, and then poof, I was in a federal prison, disgraced, divorced, and disowned by family and friends, Darcy said bitterly. Darcy, please, you don't have to. I started to say gently. I do have to say this, Darcy almost shouted. A few people began to look our way. She took a deep breath, looked at the table and continued, I want to apologize to you for what I did to you. You were, and still are the only man I have ever loved. There will never be another man in my life. I loved you, and I treated you like crap. I lied and cheated on you, and then I got paid big money for my job with my lover, which makes me a 304. I want you to know that none of this was your fault. You had made me happy mentally, emotionally, and sexually. I was a failure as a girlfriend and a wife. If we had kids, my failure would have been even worse, she said in a rush. She was having some sort of breakdown. So what about Gen 1? I never did know exactly what happened there. I asked quietly, even though I was afraid there would be more bad news. Chad had been tracking you electronically. He knew you were coming up to Cambridge, but he didn't know about the legal nuclear bombs you were about to drop on him and me. I guess talking to your dad and Glow SEC face-to-face was a great idea. You confirmed everything about me, and unknowingly I was on my way to being a divorcee and a guest at Club Fed Penitentiary, she said bitterly. And the obstruction charge? Chad was working on a cancer vaccine, but he was secretive since he did the formula work himself. I was in charge of arranging for test subjects and monitoring the results. Then 2 people died. The FDA visited us. I lied to them per Chad's instructions. He said I was just as guilty as he was since I was part of the project, and if he went to jail, I would too. Then over the next month, 2 things happened. First, the stress and fear got to him. He really began to savagely use me. He tortured me while I was in horrible bondage. I never knew that someone could be so sadistic. Second, 9 more subjects died. We panicked, and he told me that we would start destroying records the next day. However, Chad and I were arrested that night. Well, you know the rest, she said. I noticed that her voice had gone from low to a sobbing whisper. Those people, those poor people. I am so sorry for them and for us and the children we never had. I should have just killed myself over 10 years ago. I never got anything right in my life. Heck, I couldn't even get myself murdered in prison. After I picked a fight with the toughest witches in the yard, I ended up in hospital and from there to solitary. What a 100% loser, she muttered in resignation. The feelings in me made me get up, sit next to her, and put my arm around her. I put my fingers under her chin and gently made her look at me. I forgive you, I said. She went silent. I forgive you for everything. I know you cheated. I know you lied to me. I just want to move on. This was the only door that I needed to cross. My journey from your husband to your ex-husband ends today. With that, I stood up and held out my hand. She shook my hand, and before she could say anything, I walked out. I could hear her crying, but it would be the last time I hear that. One long chapter in my life was over. For the next few years, I participated in charity events and in my kids' lives. When you put all your efforts in raising the kids, time seemed to fly. My life was now more like a Hallmark movie. The new family unit consisted of me, Eddie, who is now 16, Casey, who is 12, little Rebecca, who is 7, and 2 German Shepherd pups aged 2. So what happened as the years went on? Eddie played wide receiver in high school and is now a major in the Marine Corps. Casey, after giving us fits in her wild teenage years, which included being kicked off the cheer squad for some major rules violations, is a veterinarian. Rebecca became an award-winning baton twirler in high school, college, and in competitions just like her mom Melody, and is now an assistant bank manager. I never married or never dated again. Do I have any regrets? Well, not really. Is there anything that I want to change in my life if I can go back in time? Nah, everything that happens because God has a plan for us. So, no, I cannot think of changing anything. Life is full of ups and downs, but at the end of it all, it is good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.